Amin Elhassan. Yes, finally. It's a Samson sit-down. Been working with Amin for a year and a half, and we finally corralled him. Welcome to Nothing Personal, Amin.
I've been waiting for this invite for a long time. I thought it was personal then.
Oh, it's definitely personal. We had something scheduled, and then you were on a plane or doing what you do.
Yes, that happens.
You know, we're in the Meadowlark universe, we're in the Levitard universe, and we are boxed in as the front office people.
Yes.
I was in the front office in baseball for many years. You were in the front office in basketball. I want to talk about your career because it interests me because it's very similar to my career in that front office, and now I'm in front of the camera. And so the minute that it switched and you're out of a team, I lost after my career. I lost a sense of identity, and I lost the ability to answer the question easily, hey, what do you do for a living?
Yeah.
It was very easy when I was with the team. Yeah, I work for the Florida Marlins.
Right.
What do you do now? I feel like when I say I'm a podcaster, that has sort of a pejorative connotation, which it shouldn't.
Well, it shouldn't, but it does because of where the industry has gone in the last 3 years, really. I mean, just the idea of having a show that is more than 3 years old is there's a massive gap between shows that last 3 years and shows that don't. And so, yes, for some people, being a podcaster actually is a position of
Influence. The Smartless guys.
Yeah.
Making more. Jason Bateman will make more money on Smartless than Ozark.
Yeah, pretty much. You know, if you grow to that level, you know, there's a place where this becomes incredibly lucrative. But because so many people are talking into microphones and putting on headphones and looking into a camera now, because this has all become a video medium, there's no barrier to entry. So to say I do this, there's nothing to indicate whether I'm excellent at doing this or I'm just some guy.
So how do you answer the question? When someone meets you, let's say you're at a bar. Hi, I'm Amin. Hey, what do you do? We do that here in America. That's like our opening question.
What do you do? Yeah.
It's so weird in Europe. No one cares. Just, hey, you want to have a cigarette?
Absolutely. Yeah, let's get a drink. No, I think for me that answer becomes some version of I talk about sports for a living. Because I don't like calling myself a podcaster. I don't think of myself as a podcaster. I think a lot of the things that I do aren't done for the podcast medium, although they might be podcastable, right? What we do on Levitard Show, what I do on Oddball, I look at these as TV shows. We're doing TV shows. We're on a TV network. That's what I'm doing. And then you might rip the audio and let the listeners be able to, people who can't watch because they're working at the same time or they're driving or whatever it is. But I don't call that a podcast. Cinephobe, what I do, on the side, that's a podcast. Because
is that your side? You call that your side hustle?
It is a side investment. I won't call it a side hustle, but it's an investment. It's a very lucrative investment as well. The company that we run, Count the Dings, has never been in the black since we started it. We've sold podcasts to The Athletic. We've sold podcasts.
Do you mean it never been in the red?
Never been in the red, excuse me.
Being in the black is good. Yes. You want to be in the black.
Sorry, yes. We're always in the black. I don't know why.
We're not even going to edit that out.
No, leave it in.
Because you're a podcaster.
There it is, yeah. And that's how you guys know I'm always perfect. Anytime you see me make a mistake, that's the first time it's happened. But the idea is when someone asks me what I do for a living, I say I talk about sports for a living because there's any number of places. I work for SiriusXM NBA Radio. I do multiple shifts a week. That's not podcast. That's not podcasting. That's radio work, which, believe it or not, is very different from podcasting. So I do all these different things. They are all linked by the same thing, which is it's sports. That's why I say I talk about sports for a living. But you're right. When I work for a team, people say, what do you do? I'm the assistant director of basketball operations for the Phoenix Suns. That was a clear title, or whatever I was before that.
It takes the stress away. And then people say, hey, what does that mean? What do you actually do? Yeah. I'm happy to answer that for you if you have a minute.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll get a drink, have a cigarette.
Yeah.
We'll do something fun. But this, I sometimes throw in, hey, what do you do? Yes, I have a show that's been on for over 5 years. So sometimes I'll drop the amount of time in order to give it gravitas.
Gravitas, yeah. That's a good idea. I should start doing that.
Because you can say for how long you've been doing something. Yeah. So when you transitioned, my transition was caused by a firing. Mm-hmm. That's how mine. What caused your transition?
My transition was caused.
Normally it's a firing, actually, I would assume.
What's that?
Normally it's a fight.
It was a mutual.
Oh, I love it.
It's the Seinfeld. We both agreed to break up, and it's the first amicable.
Tell
breakup
us the
ever.
truth.
Yeah, so
how did that go in the meeting when it was a mutual party?
So it wasn't amicable at all. I don't know why I said that. It was actually pretty contentious, but it was the most contentious simultaneous thing you could get, which is I worked for the Phoenix Suns when we were really good. We were one of the best teams. We influenced, if you watch basketball now, we influenced the way people play basketball to a great extent. And I worked for people who were the top caliber people. I worked for Steve Kerr, whose resume at this point is unassailable, David Griffin, who was the GM of the Cavs when they won the championship and is now the president of basketball ops for the New Orleans Pelicans. Alvin Gentry was our coach. We had Mike D'Antoni as a coach as well before that. I worked with a bunch of people who were generally regarded as excellent at their job. And then Steve Kerr and David Griffin quit a day apart off of one another because the owner had made promises that he then revealed he had no intention of keeping. He just said it to say it.
Promises for money or for substance?
So this a little bit of both. So this is what happened. We were going into the season before a lockout season. And everyone's contract was kind of due to end right before that lockout was supposed to happen, the staffers. And so the staffers were nervous. They were like, what if we go into lockout and then we're out for a while and none of us are getting paid? And, especially when we talk about assistant coaches, which you know this, the head coach makes millions of dollars. Maybe your associate head coach might make 7 figures. But then everyone else.
Buck and a quarter.
Yeah.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky. There are a lot of people making $50,000, $60,000 as assistant coaches, and many of them are not former players who have a playing salary to fly back on, right? They're pretty much people who are career grinders who are hoping maybe to move up one seat and you get to the 6-figure, and then the next seat you maybe get to that associate head coach, and then you become a head coach.
There's 100 people who want those jobs.
Absolutely, at all times.
Who would do it for $1 less, by the way.
By the way, hundreds of people who are either already in it doing what you're doing, or all the people who are on the outside who are sniffing a way to get back in. So Steve Kerr says, that makes total sense. I'm going to go to the owner and I'm going to pitch this. And he goes to the owner and says, look, the guys are worried. And I want to be able to guarantee them just for that next year, the season that will be a lockout-shortened season. And the owner says something that at the time we're like, that's very reasonable. He had just fired a head coach, and so he's still paying for that guy. And he says, I don't know if these guys are the right guys either. So I don't want to be on the hook for all this money for people who don't even work for me. You guys have to go out and prove it to me this season. So we say, fair, go back to the staff and say, look, this is the deal. Robert wants you guys to prove it. So we're like, okay.
You're saying Robert, just for
Robert
people
Sarver.
listening. Robert Sarver, a very, very complicated ownership career.
I'm sure we'll talk about that at some point. So the coaches all understand, okay, this is our deal. We got to go out and do it. Preseason, we are ranked anywhere from to finish 7th in the West to not even making the playoffs. Nobody thinks that we're going to be good. We end up winning 54, 55 games. We're the 3 seed. We go to the conference finals. We sweep the Spurs along the way. And we have a very hard-fought series against the Lakers that ends up with, Kobe Bryant hitting some amazing shots. And they go to the finals and they play against Boston and they win, right? So we're disappointed we didn't win the title. But, as far as expectations
You feel like you outperformed.
We outperformed all expectations. But no one thought we were going to be this good. At that time, we had the 4th best offense in the history of basketball, behind only like the 86 Celtics and the 96 Bulls.
What about the Nuggets? Do you remember when they would score like 150 points?
Yeah, but they weren't efficient.
That's very
ours
true.
was efficiency driven. It was points per 100.
Paul Westhead?
It was Paul Westhead.
Nice.
The guru of Go is what they used
I
to
liked
call him.
showing you that I'm an NBA guy.
I used to work for Paul Westhead when he worked for the Phoenix Mercury, the first championship they won. I was the video coordinator. I was the first ring that Phoenix ever won in basketball. I was part of that, and no one ever remembers.
Did he get to meet Peter Siegel?
I think so. I think Peter Siegel did talk to him. I don't know if they met.
That's a total Winning Time reference. By the
I don't
way,
think
for
they
those
met,
of us.
but I know he talked to him because I watched the little clips they would do afterwards with Rick Fox interviewing the people. So, but anyway, so we come back and Steve's like, "Well, you said the guys need to prove it. Here we go. Let's prove it." By the way, so we lose probably around Memorial Day. We have exit interviews, and that's when the media comes in also, and as everyone's going out cleaning the locker or whatever. They catch Steve and says, so what's going to happen next year? And say, well, we want to bring everybody back. We think we have something special here. We think we've built a culture here, and we want to continue that. Great. Steve has his meeting with Robert, says, well, the guys kind of did what you asked them to do, so let's go ahead and knock that, tack that year on. And Robert's answer was something to the effect of, well, I have him under contract, so I don't really have to do meaning he never intended to make good on his promise. So for Steve, this is the biggest breach. I might put my name on it. I told those people something, and now you're telling me you had no intention of ever honoring it. Now you make me, by proxy, dishonorable. And Robert says, allegedly this part, like, oh, by the way, I need you to take a pay cut. Again,
into the lockout.
This is a year before the lockout, but this is literally days after an unmitigated success, right? So Steve's like, why am I doing this? My family lives in San Diego. I'm flying back and forth just to catch my son's basketball games, my daughter's volleyball games. Like, I'm living this stretched life. I'm stressed all the time. I'm getting calls from my owner, texts from my owner, 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. I don't need to do any of this shit. I'm Steve Kerr. I can call Turner right now and they'll have me back. And that's what he did. He quit. He said, I'm good. And he goes to Turner, and Turner's like, yeah, right here next to Marv Albert, the number 1 slot. And now Steve.
Tough thing, though, is that when you feel responsible for people and you quit and walk away. And in terms of pay cuts, I think we just want to present the other side, which is many organizations heading into a CBA negotiation where you think there's going to be a work stoppage. It's not uncommon at all. It's like what happened during COVID when there were furloughs.
I think it's less to do with money taken away or money,
than the broken promise.
It's the broken promise. It's you looked you in the eye and you said, we did it, and you said, I don't have to do anything because you're under contract. And that, to me, that's like, if I can't, and that was really the big thing, is we were operating under such duress directly due to ownership. I'll give you a great example. We would have our draft board in the war room, and it would have the names of every guys at every position and how we ranked them, whatever. And it started getting out, like the local radio shock jock guy was John Gambadoro, like seemed to know everyone that we liked. How is this possible? Who's talking to Gambadoro? Who's talking to Gambadoro? I'll tell you who was talking to Gambadoro. It was Robert Sarver.
Do you think that was uncommon, though? I could insert several other owners' names. I worked for an owner.
Right.
Not very dissimilar. Now, not similar at all to some of the stuff that Sarver did that we're not talking about, which we could, but that would be a whole separate show. But in terms of talking to the media, leaks, using employees against each other.
Yes.
Constantly
all
going below to go over the GM's head because he doesn't want to deal with the GM. These are not, I wouldn't say Sarver's the only owner who acts that way.
I'm not saying he was. I'm saying that's how he acted, and it made us doing our jobs infinitely 100%. More difficult than here where we are across the street from a place where everything is done by the book, right? In the Miami Heat. So to button up that story, what we started doing was we wouldn't write the names in order. While we're discussing, we would make markings, like, okay, this guy, and then at the end of every meeting, I would go through and I would just make random circles and stars and underlines and.
So you were trying to hide things from your own owner.
We were actively playing defense against him, until it became time for a decision, because otherwise we had nothing that was sacred.
Did he have a mole in the room? Our owner had moles.
Here's the thing. Was your guy charismatic in any way? Because ours wasn't.
The owner or the mole?
No, the owner. Because I feel
yes, he's a big baseball fan. He's a really great guy. He didn't care about corporate structure. He didn't care about chain of command. He cared about media. He cared about players, and whoever told him something, he liked the idea.
Yeah, I think we did a good job of staying very in-house. We were tight-knit. We didn't have a huge staff. Part of that was because we didn't have resources to have a huge staff. But part of it is, as I look around the league and I see all these massive armies, I'm like, that's not, you can't run it like that, because it's not like a regular company where you just have a bunch of people. In essence, it has to be small. It has to be like super focused.
My first experience with the NBA was with Red Holzman.
Oh, nice.
Red Holzman was my mentor. I met him. Selma, his wife, taught me how to score a game.
Really?
You know, you score a baseball game, that's
Yeah.
something, but you can score a basketball game.
Yeah.
And Selma Holzman would score every game. She went to every game, and I learned how to do it. And his bench was him and two other guys.
Yeah.
And that's how I learned, and I got to be his assistant for an old-timers game.
Nice.
Anyway, so many great NBA
By the way,
stories.
you
but-
know the Red Holzman story, right?
Which one?
Red Holzman was in the front office, and Dickie McGuire was coaching, and Dickie was terrible at coaching, and Red Holzman was terrible at being a front office guy, and they flip flopped, and they became amazing at their jobs. Dickie McGuire,
613 wins, Redhead.
I worked for Dickie McGuire. Like when I was an intern for the Knicks, I worked directly with Dickie McGuire.
What year were you with the Knicks?
2004, 2005, that season.
So that's post Red.
Oh yeah, no,
that's
this
post
is
Pat.
Yeah, this is.
I forgot how young you are.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been around. That was like my second NBA job. So, but when I worked there, one of the things I had to do was Dickie McGuire was old school. He would handwrite all of his scouting reports. Well, we had a scouting report database. So like, we need someone to input the reports. I said, well, fine, I'll do it. So I sit there in the office, and I'm on the computer, and Dickie's in there. He's opening his mail. He's got like everything that comes in there, and fan mail, and sign this card, and all that stuff. And I'm putting it in. I say, Dickie, can I ask you a question? All the other scouts, their reports are like 3-4 paragraphs long. It's a lot of stuff. Yours are like a couple of lines, and it's literally like, hey, good motor. Like to see him a couple more times, maybe second round. He'd say stuff like that about like great prospects. One time he said literally 3 letters, CNP, and I said, what does that mean? And he says, cannot play. Just that's it. So I said, well, everyone else writes these long things. You're only writing a couple words. Why is that? He said, kid, we all know who can play and who can't play. The only reason you write anything more than a few words is because you're trying to cover your ass in case you're wrong. And it struck me because it's kind of true. Like, for the most part in basketball, we know who's good and who's not. Now,
So you're saying fewer surprises than in baseball?
Yes.
Where you're trying to project kids at 16, 17,
Yeah.
18, and they don't become good until 25 in most cases.
Right.
But in basketball, it's a bit easier. So how did you differentiate yourself? Because you blew past something that our audience talks about all the time. How did you get to where you are? What do you do? How do you get involved in sports? I'm sure you get asked that all the time.
Yeah.
And you just said, I believe, one of the great things you want to hear in a high school cafeteria, I've been around. And so how did that manifest itself?
And I say this to everybody who's like, oh, maybe let me take some notes. The world is so different now. The way all of these sports are operating, the way I got in would never happen now. But I was going to school at Georgia Tech to become an engineer because I thought that's what you're supposed to do. You get a job where you're always going to have a job, and you're always going to have a paycheck. You work for 30 years for some corporate, Schlumberger or GE or whatever, and then you retire and you get your pension and all that. And while I was there, I remember my roommate woke me up one morning, a Saturday morning, and said, "Hey, the Hawks are hiring. Let's go down there." And it was Saturday morning, I'm like, "Get the hell out of my room." It's we had a late Friday night. They're not going to hire us. What are you talking about? He said, who knows? Maybe they will. And I'm like, no, they're not. And he kept kind of giving me reasons. I'm like, this is stupid. And then he finally said the words that made me stop for a minute and think. I'm like, okay, maybe. Which was, who knows? We might get to go to some games for free. So I'm a huge basketball fan. I'm at the cutting edge in terms of fandom at the time. The idea that this is the moment in internet history where all these newspapers start putting their stuff online. And so me, huge NBA fan, I live in Atlanta. I can read Sam Amick in the Sacramento Bee talk about the Kings and what's wrong with them as they're getting ready to play the Knicks, because I'm a huge Knicks fan. And so my friends would be like, oh, I can't remember who played for the Kings at the time, but it would have been like,
Kevin Johnson.
No, not that.
He was a son and a king.
Yes, he was, but not
And
at
the
that
mayor.
point. It would have been, and the mayor of Sacramento. It would have been something like, let's say, Mitch Richmond, he's going to kill us. Well, actually, Mitch has been dealing with this sore hip issue, and they were like, how do you know these things? Like, because I'm using the internet that nobody on campus really used for except to check scores to read about these things. One of the things I found was the collective bargaining agreement, loaded as a PDF. So I read it. I wanted to know, in 1998, the NBA enacted this new collective bargaining agreement that changed everything. It's like, that's where we get the whole, you have to match salaries in a trade. That's where we get, you can't have a contract more than 7 years and their maximum salaries, all of those things. And you can give them raises of 7.5%, but not if you don't have their bird rights. All that stuff was in this document. And I was like, wait, why can't we trade? Well, why did we trade? And I wanted to understand. So I read the collective bargaining agreement. So I'm the guy that, hey, why did they trade him? Like, well, they had to trade him because X, Y, Z. So this is, by the way, this is just me being a fan in a way that kind of fan did not exist in 1998, 1999, around that time, right? So get the call. We go down to Phillips Arena, or what was Phillips Arena, now State Farm Arena, I think. And there's
I can't keep track anymore.
700 people, and they hired 6. And me and my roommate were 2 of the 6.
Did you go to free games?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was there for actually, I say Phillips Arena, I lied. I was there for the ribbon cutting ceremony when they opened the building. Ted Turner was there. And I was like, oh my God, it's Ted Turner. I was so impressed that I was within a few yards from Ted Turner. I thought that was like the pinnacle of like me meeting famous people. So I start working, and I'm working for field marketing, which is basically glorified street team. We're not even in the arena. We're at malls on the weekends, putting together these displays. You know, compare your hand size to the Kempe Mutombos. Hey, what's you and Alan Henderson's shoe size? Who's got?
You had to schlep around free shirts.
Yeah, and
koozies.
Koozies. We had a basket, like a regulation basket that folded up. But if you made like 2 out of 3 free throws, you got tickets to the game, and good tickets too. Not like upstairs, because it's the Hawks. No one wants to go to Hawks games. We're giving out lower level, maybe 10, 11 rows up. So very quickly I realized this is currency. So it went from, hey, you know, donate $10 to Hawks charities and get opportunity to shoot 2 for 3 to get tickets to, all right,
I love the aggressiveness, actually, because your story, you say can't be done now, and I'm going to tell you that's not true, actually.
But this part, I mean, this is all entry level stuff, so that's cool.
But the way you got in,
yeah.
you took a chance. You got out of bed,
yep.
and you went, and you were recognized. Whether it was 6 out of 700,
yep.
Sometimes it's 6 out of 2,700. Sometimes you just have the look. Who knows? You have the intelligence. But you read something, you learned something,
yeah.
You differentiated yourself. And what people don't realize is once you're in, then all of a sudden you immediately have a leg up.
You've already, there's thousands of people who want this job, right? The moment you get on the inside, even if it's literally just inside the door and you're still a mile walkway
even
down,
the street team,
you're already better than the 90% of the people who are still on the outside, right? So do that. At the end of the year, they promote the best of this team to work in arena game ops. And so now I get promoted, and I work in arena game ops, and now I'm close to the team. I'm seeing the coaches. I'm seeing the front office people. If not my first, yes, probably my first real NBA friend was Rick Mahorn. Rick Mahorn was an assistant coach for the Hawks, and I was walking in one day. I was carrying boxes.
A great Pistons power forward,
yes.
For those listening.
And
Go Google him. He was a force.
When they talk about the bad boys, they call the Pistons the bad boys. It usually starts with Mahorn, Lambier, and Rodman. Like those 3, that was the muscle.
He was a tank. That's back when in the NBA, you drive the lane, you're going to be down on your tuchus.
We had enforcers.
That's
was
what it is.
The age of the enforcers. So I'm carrying these boxes, and Mahorn walks in. He just parked. It's a game day. He walks up, and he slaps the boxes full of like koozies or something like that. There's shit everywhere. And I'm like, what the hell, man? And he walks off laughing. I'm like, what a jackass. But then I realized, and he told me this later.
I now may be cool.
Yeah, it's like I knew you could take it. I knew you were cool with it, and I was like, oh, I guess so. And so I got to know him really well, and it was fun to now reconnect. I worked with him at NBA Radio, and it was like remembering, like he remembers the first time he saw me after I left the Hawks was years later. I'd worked for the Knicks, I'd worked for the Suns, I'd left. I'm in media. I work for ESPN, and I'm at like a Pistons Nets game or something. I'm in the media dining room, and he walks in with the trainer, and he's like, what the hell are you doing here? Because in his mind, just that skinny kid that he knew in Atlanta years and years before.
With the koozies.
Yeah, exactly. How did you end up here? Which, watch this, full circle, when I worked for the Hawks, there was a kid who was a ball boy who his mom, I think, worked for Turner. And so we kind of knew him, and he's a good kid. Like, you mess around with him, but like, you know, you give him some money to go get some whatever. And years later, when the Warriors won their first championship in 2015, I'm at the after party there, and, you know, with Steve Kerr and all those guys, and I see the kid, and his name is Ryan Atkinson. And I'm like, Ryan, what are you doing here? He's like, I work for the Warriors. I'm the director of basketball ops for their G League team. And it's just like, wow. It's just the full circle of seeing someone.
It's incredibly important to recognize, and I think it's one of the biggest misconceptions out there in the sports world. It's not, you know, you say something that if people said to me in an interview, I'm not happy to hire, I'm not looking for fans, actually.
Right.
So when you're going to interview, one of the things that we never wanted is, hey, I'm a huge Marlins fan.
Right.
Not that interested. I need someone who recognizes you got to work. It's a grind.
Absolutely.
And you got to want it. And the other thing of note, and I think you found it in your career, but tell me, is that the number of people who get into sports and then leave of their own recognizance because they're like, this isn't all that much fun.
Right.
I'm working my tail off. I'm barely getting paid anything. And by the way, I'm going to have to move to like 5 different places in order to keep going.
David, that's if you're lucky.
And that's if I'm the best.
Right. If you're actually good enough for other places to want you, yes, you are going to move. But for a lot of people, they don't even get there because it's either, especially, you know, for me, a lot of people I know who wanted to do it, and hey, you did it to me, I'm a drug, and then they realize you get paid how much, and you get no days off, and your hours are 18-hour days and 7-day weeks, and
you gotta want it.
And I'm like, look, man, it's not fun. Like it's fun because this is what I wanted to do. So for me, working for the Hawks in that moment, and being close to these guys, it's like, this is what I want to do. It's not just because that first year I was just like, oh, this is cool. We get to go to some games. Now I'm in the arena. I'm there every home game. I'm getting to know, like I said, Pete Babcock and like all the other guys that work in the front office. And I'm like, oh, this is what I want to do. I don't want to just work in game ops or whatever. I want to do basketball ops, which at the time, off limits. Did you play? No. Is your father the owner or your uncle the owner? No. Do you know, like, did you play, you know, with someone who, no, I don't have any.
Just me.
Just me. So
I started because of nepotism.
There are a lot of people.
You can't stay.
A lot of people. And it'll always.
Doesn't matter how you start. Do you miss it?
Do I miss working
for a team?
I miss parts of it.
Me too.
There's things
What's the number one thing you miss? Let's say it on 3, because I can say it in 2 words.
Okay.
On 3. 1, 2, 3. Winning
Playoffs.
and losing.
Oh, really? For me, it's specific times of year. I miss the playoffs. I miss training camp. I miss pre-draft, the pre-draft process. February Wednesday game. Don't give that feeling of losing a Wednesday game in February that drops us from 2nd place to 4th place in the standings, and feeling like the world is ending because of that.
I miss that.
I don't miss it. And you you've won World Series, so it's different. But I do know for me, there was never a joy from winning like that Wednesday game in February. It was just a relief, like, oh, thank God. Thank God.
So you never ever liked winning more than you hated losing from the very beginning of your career?
Always hated losing more.
So you couldn't enjoy the wins.
The only wins I enjoyed were playoff wins because it was like, it's happening. It's happening. Oh my God, we're actually going to do this. Like that feeling of, holy shit, we're going to win this thing. Because now the wins are directly tied to your progress.
Okay, he's swearing too much, right?
Oh, yeah.
Hold on. A Wednesday, game 42, a walk-off jump shot to win the game.
Come on. That's a good feeling. That's a good feeling. But most of them weren't like that. Most of them were.
No, that's the whole point. But
But most of those
the high you're looking for.
Sure.
But I don't get that in my new careir.
No,
I have good shows, but I don't feel.
But I don't.
But I look at rankings and I look at downloads and I look at followers and I can't get there.
David, I don't feel that high. Definitely don't feel that playoff high. Right? You know what else I don't feel? That feeling of despair in the middle of February, like, oh my God, we're all going to get fired at the end of this year.
But you can't feel that high without risking the low, right?
I mean, I guess, but I value more not being an insane person to be around because I'm so worried about stuff that for other people is, because I think that's the hardest part. For people who don't work in this is their joy. This is their entertainment.
That's the fight I have with everyone at the Levitard show.
It's our It's our freaking life. This is for us. It's like this is life and death. It is, because my ability to earn, to stay in this business, and to take care of my family, and is all tied to things that I really don't have a direct influence on, and that's me being assistant director at my highest peak, and if I work to become a general manager or even president of a team. I still don't control it.
I was
don't
president,
control it.
Couldn't control it.
I could have been head coach and president. I don't control it. It's at the end of the day, it's those guys out there. And if some guy's having a bad day, or some guy is feeling
distracted in a fight with his wife,
right? Like, how many times did you encounter that where the guy's having issues at home?
I used to dismiss it. Guys would tell me, and I'd say, "Are you telling me that you can't focus for 4 at bats? You're telling me you can't put your work aside? I do it every day. I'm not exactly living the life of joy at home, but guess what? Work is work, home is home, and you have to do your job." But looking back on it, I've changed a little on that regard, because it's hard.
I think especially, I got to see it up close with a lot of the players, that the influences around them, and people always think it's like they're homeboys from and it's like, no, it's typically mom and dad, siblings, significant others. Those, and God bless those people, and they look out for those people in many ways. In many ways, they are so detrimental, because they fill their heads with things that I don't think these players would think of otherwise. When people talk about things in the media and people speaking about, most of those guys back then, now it's different because everyone's just picking up their phone as soon as the game's over. But back then, most of those guys didn't read the paper. The way they found out was somebody who's related to them reads the paper.
This is a tough thing we're going to talk about now, and I'm apologizing to the audience. But what Amin is saying, I want to make sure everyone is clear. Family.
Yes.
Family is extremely detrimental to performance, more than I find it additive. In my career, I found that fathers with players, brutal. And then I realized sons are always trying to prove themselves to their fathers, and fathers either have the thumb down saying you're never going to be better than I am, and the pressure, and it can start when they're kids. Siblings are a time suck, and get me tickets. I want tickets for this. My brother, he's an NBA player, right? It's a major thing, and people don't talk about it, and it's hard for the players.
To me, it's less in the NBA, and maybe this is a basketball thing. It's less pressures of you need to be better or whatever, and more about they're screwing you over. I can't believe that coach is playing him over him. Oh, I can't believe that they are filling their heads with negativity a lot of times, and they think they're being supportive.
How did you deal with that? Did you have an opportunity? Is there an occasion in your career where you actually sat with a player? Because I can think of one. I can think of many, but tell me the one, if you can think of it, where you sat with a player and said, "Listen, you are jeopardizing your entire career because of these distractions."
Not to that level, but a fairly serious conversation with a very good player. I don't even know if I should say his name, but there was a player who got hurt during training camp. He was one of our best players. I had to drive him back from camp to.
What year was this? Oh, damn, I was so close. I had him.
So we drive back to Phoenix because we're going to see the team doctor, right? On the drive, we're talking. He calls his family. He's got him on speakerphone. The family is mother effing the team. He's got a contract situation coming up, and they're talking about. They're not asking him, "Hey, how are you?" It's all about the contract, and you need to tell them, and you need to show them that you mean business, and da 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 da. And I just sit there silently, and then after he's done with the call, I said, "Look, hey man, I'm never going to tell you. Your family loves you. They want what's best for you, but sometimes their advice isn't good, and you got to realize, you got to recognize." They're saying what they're saying because they are not inside with us, and they're saying the things that they think is in your best interest, and they're trying to protect you, but that's not what.
How did it get received? Negatively?
No, he was
acknowledged.
He acknowledged it. He didn't wholeheartedly yeah, I know they're crazy, but he kind of listened, and he was like, I hear your point, and
it's worse today.
What's
with
up?
social media. It's
No,
worse
now
today
it's
for
impossible.
me. It's
Now it's impossible because they're all growing up in this cauldron of instant feedback from everybody. They care what John 654545 had to say about them.
We work for a guy who's the same. Just not for nothing. Lebitard, I love him. The number of times I get a tweet that he forwards to me from John 4696969, it's staggering. And I tried with players to stop that, and that was the beginning of social media. Now I feel as though I couldn't do anything.
Because back then, at the beginning, in the early 2010s or whatever, everyone, it was new to all of us, right? It's like, oh, there's this thing called Twitter. Oh, there's this thing, and we're all learning at the same time. The generation of athletes now, they don't know a world where it didn't exist. They don't know a world where their self-worth is not tied to how many likes, how many reposts, how many comments, what the comments are saying. This is all they know. It's the reason why my children, and my oldest is 14, no social media. Not allowed.
Your children have zero social media. How old are your kids?
14 and 11.
And all of your 14-year-old friends have social media for sure.
Yes.
No Facebook. You have no
Nothing.
Snapchat.
Nothing.
And you're sure they don't have burner accounts.
I'm sure because right now,
You have a thing?
I have control over the phone, what apps are available, and if there is any workaround, like for instance,
You don't think there's a workaround?
Nope. The only workaround is getting another device, and my child does not possess the means to get another device. So,
Children are very shady.
They
shadier. Have the ability.
I'm shadier. That's
Don't all parents say that about their kids?
But
I've done that.
You know, but my parents, even though my dad lived, but it was also a very different time. So the time that we grew up in was different from how my parents grew up. So I could get away with things.
But today's different than when you grew up.
No, but I'm still in it though. Like what I was doing as a teenager, my parents weren't in it. They weren't in that. They were already old people.
You're not going to have anybody.
I'm in it.
Hold on.
David, I'm in it.
I'm ready to stop because this is impossible. You're a dad. You will never get one-upped by your kids. You'll never get where they'll do anything that you won't know. The first time they do anything with pot or with cigarettes or with alcohol or with sex, they're going to come running to you.
No, they're not going to come running. And I know they're not going to come running to me. But I think substance abuse is probably...
Not abuse. I'm talking about...
Substance use is probably way more likely to happen without me knowing because I can't be everywhere. But I'll tell you what, they won't be slaves to other people's opinions. That's my big thing. It's like, hey, all that stuff, we all grew up with it. Our parents grew up with it. Like, hey, try this, smoke this, drink this, whatever. Hey, let's sit in the back seat of a car, whatever. Like everyone has gone through that. And everyone will continue to go through that. But the difference with this generation, and that's different from the rest of us, is that these are the only people who walk around wondering what strangers think about them at all times.
Did everyone's first experience come in the back of a car? That seems to have gone generation by generation. I was just thinking about, because that was a thing with me.
Yeah?
It was because where else could there be any
privacy? You're not going back to my house. We're not going back to your house. It's like, what are you doing?
And you go to the car. Like in Wisconsin, it's cold. The whole thing is so bizarre.
Look at what Lover's Lane or whatever that's what they call it. Always like a cliff or something, and that's where everyone parks.
Looking out like Happy Days, Inspiration Point.
It reminds me of Back to the Future when they're at the dance and they're outside and he's talking about his mom. Spoiler alert! It's like, hey, let's just sit in the car.
There's no spoiler for Back to the Future.
Let's just sit in the car while it's parked. And he remembers the conversation they had in 1985 with his mom as a grown woman. It's like, hey, me and Jennifer are going to go out. We're going to go for a ride, whatever. I never did that. I never sat in a parked car with a boy. And when I watched it as a kid, I was like, what does that mean? And now I'm like, oh, they mean like they're smashing in the car pretty much.
Is that how you started to love movies? Because we have something in common that is also, in addition to front office at Metalark, we're the two people. We're also the two major movie people in this organization.
Yeah, for me, so movies, I found it to be the place where I connected with people the most. Did you see this movie? What did you think about it? Like just having that conversation. A lot of my
on dates or with friends?
No, I'm talking about with friends, with my father, with my siblings, movies. And now with my children, that's what we do. And we're like, okay, I'm home. What do you want to do? Let's watch a movie. Let's fire. We watched Beetlejuice the other day, right? Because we'd already watched Beetlejuice a couple of months ago for them for the first time. So we watched the sequel, and it's just that's where me and my kids connect.
Do you have a top 100 list?
I find ranking to be very tedious and unsatisfying.
Funny, given that we grew up in an industry where ranking is everything.
Yeah, but I don't like doing the rankings. It's much easier to be ranked than to be tasked to do the rankings.
I love the exercise of actually every movie. Do you write down every movie you watch? You know I do. I keep it on my phone, my list of every movie. So how many times do you get caught, hey, have you seen this, and you don't remember it? Have you gotten old enough where that's happened?
That's happened where I know I've seen the movie, I just don't remember anything about it. That happens a lot for Cinephobe on our podcast, where some of these movies from the 80s and early 90s are like, I watched this movie. I know I watched this movie. I just don't remember any of the plot points other than a couple of scenes here and there. And so that happens a lot. Part of it is as I'm getting older. Part of it is because the volume of movies, because remember, we didn't get to be able to watch this many movies.
It's crazy.
Back in the day. Quite the opposite, actually. What I was thinking about when I was sitting with my kids is I remember watching the same movie a billion times, which I never do anymore now. I never watched.
You had it on VCR?
Because you had it on VHS.
VHS.
Back to the Future 2, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, Last Crusade, Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, Mermaids, I want to say.
With Cher?
With Cher and Winona Ryder.
That's a funny choice.
I mean, these were the tapes we had.
Can you imagine we had to Be Kind and Rewind?
Yeah.
I'd like to get a tattoo of that. No one knows what that means.
I have a T-shirt, I think, that says Be Kind, Rewind.
It's very important.
Yeah.
When you went to rent the video and the video wasn't rewound, that's a waste of time when you brought home.
And especially, well, when they had it, Blockbuster was that speedy, it wasn't a VCR. It was just a rewinder. You put it in there, and it rewinds it fast. But if you do it in your VCR,
it takes forever.
It takes forever. You're sitting there forever.
What's your genre? What's your favorite genre?
Probably comedy. I would say comedy. I like them all. There's not a genre I don't like, but comedy. And I realized late in life that I've always liked Westerns. I wouldn't say I've watched a lot of Westerns.
Like John Wayne or like Unforgiven?
Spaghetti Westerns, and then the modern Westerns too, I think are always very well done. Have you noticed that?
I don't know where spaghetti comes from.
It comes from because all those movies were done by Italian directors with a lot of Italian actors, Good, Bad, and Ugly, for example. The number of people who speak English on that movie are very limited. But there's a lot of dubbing and ADR that happens, and Clint Eastwood is pretty much the only American actor. They're spaghetti Westerns because they were all made out of Italy. But because they were made out of Italy, there's this level of aesthetic. They took their time and they did really well with it.
I had a moment the other day that I wanted to get some therapeutic help on. I watched Juror Number 2, which is Clint Eastwood's last movie. He directed it. It just came out recently. He's 94, and it's with Nicholas Hoult, and it's an interesting movie. I'll review it maybe on Nothing Personal. We can talk about it on any show, Cinephobe. How often do you record Cinephobe?
Once a week. Well, once a week, and then we have a secondary companion show that we do bi-weekly.
So you should check it out, because loving movies makes me happy. But I was watching Juror 2, and I was thinking, this will forever be his final movie, because there's going to be a dash. I view death as a dash. You have the year you're born, dash, blank.
Right.
And when you die, you fill in the number. And then there's your profile on IMDb or wherever you Google it of projects.
Yeah.
And so Clint Eastwood's final project will be this Juror Number 2. And I'm wondering always about legacy of actors and directors, because so many get lost. So many great careers, even with the internet, they just sort of disappear. Like, people don't much talk about Eric Stoltz, as an example.
Yeah, that's
fantastic actor.
Fantastic
Did
actor.
a lot of great movies.
By the way, apparently a bit of a dick on set, and I think that might connect with.
I never met him. Is that a rumor?
No, that's rumored. I don't know.
What a terrible thing to spread about somebody.
But it's something that I've read multiple times. Like, you know what it's like? It's like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, great player, was a bit of a jerk.
Have you met him?
I have met him.
And did you? Because I've met him too. Let's talk about this. What are the 3 adjectives you would use to describe Kareem Abdul-Jabbar now that you've met him?
Well, first of all, I would say I was terrified the whole time.
He's very large.
It wasn't
and important.
It wasn't his size. It was the size.
Reputation.
The reputation. I remember he came and he did the jump, and everybody made fun of me afterward. And said, "We've never seen you that well behaved in our life." Because I like to mess with the guests.
And it wasn't respect. It was fear.
It was. I mean, it was respect based out of fear. Yes, I was. Because he's so smart, right? He's so smart. Like, I'm not talking about smart for an athlete. He's one of the smartest human beings. Like, he just knows things. And I'm not, almost rarely am I intimidated intellectually. I sit in any room, I think I can carry a conversation with anybody. But here's a guy who's a living icon, a civil rights icon, who well studied and read on history of, whether it's Harlem Renaissance. He's an author,
a music lover, a collector of albums, jazz.
And we haven't even started to talk about basketball, where I can have a basketball conversation with him. I'm just talking about having a conversation with him. I'm terrified the whole time. And he was very nice and polite, but that doesn't change what his reputation was as a player.
It bothers me terribly because the reputation that he had and the times that I've been with him, I've talked to him. I actually asked him. So we were at a charity event, and I was not in the media. I was still with the Marlins. And I asked about how you deal with the fact that you have this reputation. And he said, there's no way to effectuate change without dings to a reputation. And we talked it through. It was almost knowingly what he did.
It was, so there's a part of it, a not insignificant part of it, that is absolutely rooted in this is the backlash for being a civil rights icon. Like, okay, you're going to rock the boat. You're not just going to be some dumb athlete who like just says, hey, we won one for the team or whatever. You want to do this? You want to be a rabble rouser? Okay. Like, that's definitely a part of it. Also, there's a part of it that comes from his childhood, where he was teased and what's the weather like up there and thought of as less than. Forget about for being black.
He also stood out as black and tall. In a time when standing out for either was not great.
Right. So definitely there's some hurt and resentment there. And that happens a lot with the 7-footers in basketball. Like a lot of the most eccentric people in basketball are always 7-footers.
It's
always
hard
centers.
to be 7 feet.
Shaq, incredibly intelligent, puts on this facade that I don't think people understand how smart he is. That behind closed doors, he's not like what he is on TV. He's nothing like what he is on TV.
It's a character.
It's a character.
Does anyone play characters that you know? Weird.
So Robin Lopez. I remember Robin Lopez's first. We draft Robin Lopez, his first press conference. They asked him, "What do you like to do?" He says, "I love movies." And he says, "What's some of your favorite movies?" And he says, "Bringing Up Baby." Now I know Bringing Up Baby because I know movies, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, like this kid is weird. Like
he's tall and a twin.
Oh yeah,
doubly hard.
Tall and a twin, and both of them are eccentric. They like comic books back before comic books were this massive Hollywood thing, right? They like I said, they like these old classic screwball comedies from the 50s and stuff like that. And they like Star Wars. And again, you might say, "Oh, that's normal," but now put them around athletes. Now, how many of those guys have similar kind of interests? I could go on and on all.
People don't realize the movie Major League, where there was an example of them. Berenger, the catcher, Rene Russo wanted him to be smart. Right. So asked him to read Moby Dick.
Yeah.
And so they ended up all getting the comic books of Moby Dick and all of the great novels, like the Spark Notes from when I was growing up, or Monarch Notes, whatever you call them, Cliff Notes. And so they're all on the team plane reading these comic books, trying to be smart. There are players, like in the rest of the world, who are really, really smart. They're just also athletes. Like they're really smart people in media and really people who aren't very smart. It's not all that different. And for Kareem, I just want to put a bow on it, and I can't believe we're out of time, but the bow on Kareem is that to be Kareem is hard. To be Muhammad Ali is even harder. Right. To have the amount of attention, to be an activist, and to be looked at as this amazingly gentle, friendly, perfect soul. It's really hard. And at some point, Kareem, he was just exhausted because it was a lifetime of not ever being able to be anywhere. Right. There's no privacy in his life ever. And this is pre-social media. But
that's the thing. It's like, imagine being famous your whole life, right? That's Muhammad Ali.
For that,
Muhammad Ali had moments where like nobody knew who he was. When he was Cassius Clay in Louisville, nobody knew who he was. Maybe some locals. He could go anywhere. Then at some point you get famous and like, oh, my life has changed. Kareem never. That's why I said LeBron James, the only an analog to him in NBA history is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. The idea that this guy was famous and expectations were here as like an 8th grader, and he met every single one of those expectations.
The flameouts are way greater. We're already done.
Yeah.
I have 20 more things.
Well,
this is Amin Elhassan, Cinephobe. Please watch it, listen to it, wherever you get your podcasts. He's not a podcaster.
No.
He's everything. Thank you for your time. Appreciate you.
We'll do part 2.